Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan, who's ready for some wild, crazy, undescribable music. This week we're checking out experimental music. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be difficult to describe or understand, but it's certainly going to be pushing the boundaries of music and sound, hopefully in some direction or another. To kick this off, we are certainly going to be stressing my brain out. We're checking out Liturgy. We're looking at the song HAJJ off of the album h.a.q.q. There's a lot of stuff about this band. The creator's entire philosophy around the band and the way that the music's created and everything that goes into it. It's this massive undertaking to begin to dive into what this band project is and does, and the music, from what I've heard in the past, is just as complex. I'm expecting something pretty difficult on me today. So let's dive into this and see what Liturgy is bringing to the table with h.a.j.j. That was actually really slick. It's interesting to hear the clean vocals back there, juxtaposed with the screams. We did have a brief moment of fairly consonant sounds in that last passage. It's interesting how tight the loops are and how much repetition we have over them, mixed with the digital skips. Wow. There's some really neat ideas in here that I want to touch on that are kind of, I think they sit outside of the core sounds. Because, like, there's probably an expectation to talk about the dissonance, the width, and how full the sound sphere is, the black metal influence, and all of this. But I think what really stands out to me the most, what I thought was the coolest thing here, is about 5 minutes in, I mentioned how tight the loop was. We had the woodwind, probably maybe a recorder, going boo doo doo, boo doo doo, over and over and over. We had the 16th notes on the guitars, the drums were just blasting. Um, and just like we did this 1 bar loop over and over and over and over and over, I don't know, like 100 times. But occasionally within it, we'd also get more of like a CD skipping, a neat, 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 and then get back into it. And it's almost like combining a record skip, an older type of skip, with a CD skip, a modern kind of skip. I thought that was just a really neat parallel there, combining both of these issues, mistakes, problems with playback of a recording into something that showcased them as parallels and worked them into the music as a whole. And we'll touch on how all of this works into a larger idea in a second. But it's also interesting that on the faster CD skip sounds, it begins to, at least for me, begin to sound like old hard drive platter skipping, which is a third layer of skippage, of data skippage happening here. An auditory allusion to playback or information skippage. I don't understand how so much information was ingrained into a 1 bar loop. But it was really wild how, as I'm listening to this, I realized nothing's happening. I was like, wait, it sounds like it's skipping. And I was like, wait, I've never actually owned a record. Why would I know that this is what a record skipping sounds like? But then we do the other one. I'm like, oh, that's a CD skipping. I've had that happen before. Um, but then at times I'm like, dang, that sounds like, a hard drive dying. And it all comes together. It's all lost knowledge or a repetition of knowledge. You have an issue moving to the next phase, is whatever. I mean, that's what a skip is. Instead of going where it's supposed to, it loops back, it gets stuck in a cycle. It can't progress. I don't know if that's what the song is about, and I have a feeling that when I finally get to the lyrics, a lot of it's going to go over my head anyways. So I'm not even completely sure if I'm going to know by the end of this if this idea of being stuck on like so many levels and being unable to progress or move forward is a core theme in this track or maybe even this album. But it is something that I felt in this song consistently is trapped. Now, some of that might also be due to the other elements in the song, like the heavy use of dissonance and heavy use of compression. A lot of the timbre in these instruments are cut off. There is a lot of artificial clipping going on that's removing a lot of information about these instruments, which is why at the very beginning, well, close to the beginning, like 2 minutes in, there's this transition where we went from something that was pretty much straight black metal into like this digital skipping sound. And then we entered into a brand new section. I was like, oh, that's a clever transition right there. Really great idea. The reason that works so well is because there's so little information about these instruments. There's a lot of nuance regarding their color, timbre, characteristics that are removed for this effect. So when it turns into that pure digital skipping sound, it actually feels like it fits rather well with what we just heard because it was already beginning to sound digital as it was. A lot of the natural elements and characteristics of the guitars and of the drums and the vocals even are all being removed in effort to create this square sound. You know, when we look at the sound wave at the bottom, it's waves, right? And what I talk about when I bring up compression or clipping or anything, you kind of cut off all those little peaks, all the little things, so that all you get is the body in the middle, and you lose all that information on the top, which is the color, it's the characteristics, it's the unique elements. And so they utilize all these effects in a way to sort of just get this block of sound. And so when it digitizes into a pure block of sound, it really didn't have that far to transform to get there, which is why it feels like a natural transition into that and why it worked so well. So we have this massive wall, we have all this dissonance going on, um, inharmonious elements. The vocals, I couldn't really hear. What's that thing when you actually put emphasis on syllables? I can't think of that phrase right now. It's kind of irritating me. Enunciation. I didn't really hear any of that. Just words kind of slurred into other words. It's just the general shriek is what I got out of it. There's a lot of elements in here that push really hard against my musical sensibilities. This is a lot of stuff I don't like about more extreme musics and extreme metal in general, smashed together and presented to me, and there was no escape from it. I was forced to endure this for the 8.5 minutes that it was. And you know, if anybody in the band Liturgy is watching this for some weird reason, you know, I say endure the music. You know, I'm forced to listen to it, like I don't want to. Um, Try not to take that the wrong way. I perceive an artistic element to this. It is just really not my cup of tea. So if I say anything negative, it comes from a place of endearment. I like the artistic side of this project. Sonically, though, I will never opt to listen to it on my own, I think. And, you know, it's a lot of the characteristics here and the way that they're smashed together. And so, you know, tying it back to the idea of being stuck in a loop, I very much felt like that, especially in that section when I recognized we were in a 1 bar pattern for like a minute. And I'm like, I can't escape this. And I felt, I think, what the music might have felt as well. And I wonder if, like I said, liturgy is this massive undertaking mentally, theoretically. There's just a lot of philosophy behind it, and go look it up. It's not hard to find an entry point into the entire worldview of the liturgy project. Um, I'm not super well versed into it, so I can't really speak about much of it. I know it exists. That's about the extent of it. And I only know it exists because of y'all. Let me know in the comments of past liturgy tracks. But I wonder if they see the music as an entity. Because it's usually when I talk about music, the music creates a vibe or a feeling or an atmosphere to modify mine. A song might make me sad or make me happy, but rarely do I feel sympathetic to the music. The music here feels stuck. It's not that it's creating an image of being stuck or being in a loop. I feel like the music itself is an entity that cannot move on, and it is just as frustrated as I am. That is not something a lot of music makes me think about. And I wonder if they also have that perception of the music, if it's not just a vehicle to deliver ideas or emotions, but is a part of the project as well, which is like a really difficult high level concept now that I think about it. So, like, if that doesn't make sense to you, I don't know why it makes sense to me, but it does. I felt like I was stuck with the music, and we were both trying to get out of that moment, and neither one of us was making any headway about it, primarily because the music is set in stone and it just doesn't know that. The music must walk its path, it is predetermined, and I must listen to it. I cannot influence it, it is not interactive media. And we were both just stuck here, and it kind of sucked. Not that the music was bad. I mean, no music's bad. I didn't enjoy the music, but not that the music is bad or that the music sucked, but that the situation sucked on a metaphysical level. I don't know if this is what they want my experience to be. I feel like possibly if you enjoy this music, that section is a totally different experience for you. But for me, I just found this profound connection with the music as an entity, and like we were coexisting in this hell for a moment. Neither one of us wanting to be here, but both of us forced to be. But something interesting happened when we came out of that loop. And we entered into more or less the next loop. It was kind of a reprise of what we had done. It was the last minute and a half of the track. I think my brain had enough and just checked out. I was like, nope. And I went and thought about something else. Now, I don't like saying this because the whole point of being a critical reactor and listening to music actively is that I'm listening to the music. And I don't know if it is a positive or a negative for me to say that I stopped listening to it. But I am a fan of transparency, and y'all are here to see my reaction to this, to know where it took me and my interpretation of it. And this song ejected my mind. I went and thought about something completely different. I don't know if that's because it finally hit that trance state and it became a background sound for my mind to explore other ideas. And I did explore a really weird idea. I ain't going to share it right here because I think it's going to be interesting if I can do something about it. It's a musical thing, right? Something I kind of want to write. So I guess you could say the song influenced a creative decision of mine, which is also a sentence I didn't think I'd say at the start of this. But yeah, I don't know if I entered that trance state or if my mind was just so done with this wall of sound noise that it checked out. But this is something that doesn't happen too often. Even with stuff that I find difficult to engage with or is overwhelming, I tend to be able to stick with it for the entirety of the runtime, if nothing else, because it's my job. But here I couldn't. And I suppose you can read that either way you want. This might have just been incredibly overwhelming, or this could be one of the few songs out there that, regardless of how active I wanted my listening to be, it became a passive listening experience. And not a lot of music can force my brain to turn that switch off. And it is something that gets switched on. The active listening is not a default state, it is something I engage for this specific purpose. And for the song to reach into my brain and turn it off and say, "You're on your own, feel me, don't think about me," that's kind of impressive. And I think that's about it. Everything else that I could talk about, I think, are things that most people would be able to pick up on. There's a black metal influence here. We got alternating bass kick and snare. We have 16th notes on the guitars. They work in dyads, presenting the same rhythm at two different pitches, one note per guitar. There are a few places where the bass comes in and gives us triads. I really appreciate that. The vocals are very compressed, difficult to listen to, very lo-fi black metal. And that's the majority of this track. It also deals with dissonance heavily. There was that one moment of consonance in the middle, and then a little bit of, I don't know, uh, transcendence around the 6 minute mark, where everything just kind of fell into place and all of the noise and cacophony reached a point of harmony. But it didn't last long, 40 seconds or so before we returned back to the more chaotic, dissonant sounds. I mean, these are all things that I think most people would pick up on. It's a noisy track with a lot of attacks from everyone, so I don't even have much else to add on to that. I'm not sure if there's anything in there that I think is particularly noteworthy outside of the aspects I already spoke about. How the repetition of these 16th notes lean into a loop and the way that that made me feel and stuff like that. Like, I've already gone into sort of the thematic and emotional side of this journey, that I think the technical side isn't quite as interesting. It really is what all of this culminates to that makes it stand out. Though I do want to add one quick thing, and that is a heavy use of higher pitched tones in relationship to other black metal. Black metal does like higher tones, especially as you get more into lo-fi black metal, but I feel like this still has a bit of the bassier presence that you would find in mid-fi black metal, but it does encourage more treble presence than I typically associate with the genre, and I think that is really interesting. Primarily because it paints a very different picture. Despite the dissonance, this doesn't feel as imposing as black metal does. It still has the weight, for sure. This is a heavy track, but it feels more of a, oh man, this isn't going to make any sense. A weightless heaviness. And you know what? A phrase that shouldn't exist and doesn't actually make any sense outside of purely metaphorical means and figurative means, I think is exactly a good description of liturgy. There's a lot of elements in here that really don't make sense, but it all comes together in a way that works on a more than literal level. I'm into some lyrics. See what's going on there. Power of God, eyelash of grace. I eat the fault line of the stars, pistons made out of marble, dripping into a grail. Eyelash of the Hajj. Hajj, Hajj, intriguing Pollyanna, conditioned sycophant, weeping ruby fire onto a sword with 40,000 blades. Power of God, eyelash of grace, indigo and violet stems gently overtake my rage. Does that make any sense to anybody else? Now, Hajj is the pilgrimage to Mecca. I don't know if they're specifically invoking that larger idea, but it could be. They are speaking about a pilgrimage in general, and maybe even a religious ritual, if we can even take the pilgrimage itself out and just look at it itself as a ritual. Sycophant weeping ruby fire onto a sword with 40,000 blades. Yeah, I don't know. If nothing else, the one thing I do pick out of this is that by the end of it, they're asking or mentioning that their rage is slowly and gently overtaken. So this song calms them, or the HAJJ calms them, or something. None of what I experienced, though, seems to be reflected in this at all. At least I can't draw any parallels, even grasping at straws. There's nothing in here I feel about being stuck in a cycle, about the. Oh, I completely forgot about that. I initially thought the song was about pain. Between all of the dissonance and the vocal delivery, the hyper distorted vocal work, um, early on in the track, about 2, 3 minutes in, I was kind of convinced the song was about being in pain or expressing pain or talking about something painful. But none of that's reflected in here either. I mean, maybe eating the fault line of the stars isn't too comfortable, but that seems more metaphorical than anything else. And I wish I knew what it was talking about. So yeah, I have no way of sort of tying all this together because I honestly have no idea what happened here in the lyrics. If anyone has any insight, please let me know. I have an inkling of a thought that it's all tied into the larger ideas of the band and that it really requires an understanding of the philosophy behind the project to understand what's going on here. In which case, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just way out of my depth regarding that. Even looking at some of the diagrams that accompany the album art, it's all real high level concepts. Um, so those are my thoughts on Liturgy's Hodge. Let me know what you thought. Anything in here that stood out to you? Did you have a different experience than I? What's your interpretation of all this? Do you have your own perspective, opinions on what we just engaged with? Let me know down in the comments section. Above the comments section, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you here, and you can find a link to my much more normie style music. Links to the Discord server and ways to support the channel. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have a special selection coming out today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to continue on with our experimental music week. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.